Madam Secretary.
RS-22-165. Consider options regarding Proposition A and the initiative ordinance to eliminate low-level marijuana enforcement and discuss any council member concerns about Proposition A.
Thank you. City Attorney Clemens.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council.
Good evening.
This is an item to consider your options with regard to the initiative ordinance. I have a presentation just to go through the background and refresher on the ordinance provision itself before we go through options. Okay, looks like you have it. All right. So a little bit of background. On May 25th, an initiative petition to eliminate low-level marijuana enforcement was filed with the City Secretary's office. And council was required to place the exact language as proposed on the ballot unless the council passed the ordinance exactly as it was proposed. The charter does not, this question has come up, the charter does not have a process to disallow an initiative petition if in its opinion it violates state or federal law. There is a provision where prerequisites, if there were prerequisites that could not be met pursuant to state or federal law, did not comply with the process. I can give an example of that if we need to, but it is my opinion that the charter required us to have an election because council did not pass the ordinance as it was proposed. And so we did have an election on November 8th, and the majority of electors voted in favor of the ordinance. State law requires that the election be canvassed, which you've just done, and once the election is canvassed, the initiative ordinance is an ordinance of the City of Killeen. All right, so I'm going to go through the ordinance provisions with you just as a refresher. So the first section says that Killeen police officers shall not issue citations or make arrests for Class A or B misdemeanor possession of marijuana, with certain exceptions. And just to be clear, that is a prohibition with regard to Killeen police officers only. It doesn't make enforcement in the city illegal by other law enforcement, but Killeen police officers shall not issue the citations or make arrests. Class C citations for drug paraphernalia shall not be issued in lieu of a possession of marijuana charge. No city funds or personnel shall be used to perform testing to confirm whether a substance meets the legal definition of marijuana. The odor of marijuana shall not constitute probable cause for any search or seizure except in limited circumstances. And officers shall be trained on the ordinance. Policies and procedures shall be updated in accordance with the ordinance, and regular meetings with stakeholders shall be arranged to discuss practices related to the ordinance. Violation of the ordinance may subject a police officer to discipline. This is not a requirement of the ordinance. It does not require discipline. And I do have an opinion that disciplining an officer while complying with state law would be problematic and would subject the city to legal challenge. Within 3 months of adoption of the ordinance and annually thereafter, a report shall be submitted to the City Council concerning implementation of the ordinance. So before we discuss your options, I want to go over specific state law that impacts this ordinance. It's already been mentioned a couple times here during the citizen comments, but this is section 370.003 of the Texas Local Government Code. And this provision states that a governing body of a municipality or a police department may not adopt a policy under which the entity will not fully enforce laws relating to drugs, and that includes Chapter 481 of the Health and Safety Code, and that's where the possession of marijuana laws are found. So I believe that the initiative ordinance would likely be found in violation of this statute because eliminating misdemeanor marijuana enforcement is not fully enforcing the possession of marijuana laws. Before I go into alternatives, I just also wanted to state, I'll go back, there are a number of other federal and state laws implicated, but this is perhaps the most direct. And because of this law and others, there could be legal challenges, and you've heard tonight that they could come from all sides. This could include lawsuits, injunctions, actions for disciplining an officer. And there are also practical concerns I wanted to mention, but the police department may be more qualified to discuss those practical concerns, but such as some of the things you've heard tonight regarding prohibiting odor of marijuana being used as probable cause, or the testing of marijuana. Those are some practical concerns the police department would have to deal with. And if you have questions about that, I know the chief is here and available to answer those questions for you. So the alternatives, though, that you have tonight are to amend the ordinance, 1, to repeal the ordinance, or 3, do not amend or repeal the ordinance. And so I can discuss in more detail what each of these options would look like, but I want to give you an opportunity to discuss and ask any questions you may have.
Would you please discuss each one of them, how it would look like if they make those decisions, please?
Okay. So amending the ordinance, staff would definitely need guidance on what you wanted to be amended in the ordinance. So what your goal there would be, because as I've stated, I believe that it would be difficult to say that you're fully enforcing the statute while also eliminating enforcement of misdemeanor marijuana, and that's the main section. That's the first section in the ordinance. So if you wanted to get rid of that conflict, that potential conflict between state law and the ordinance, then removing that section. But that is frustrated that, I mean, the will of the voters, that is clearly the main point of this ordinance, to eliminate the enforcement of misdemeanor marijuana. So if you take that out, you're kind of gutting the ordinance. So if your goal was to comply with local government code 370 and not have any conflict at all, not have that be an issue, then amending the ordinance to that nature would be pretty difficult. If your goal to amend the ordinance is to not specifically address that concern so much as the practical concerns, we can go through each section of the ordinance and say, okay, we want to keep this, we don't want to keep this because this doesn't make sense. This doesn't work for the police department. Things like we mentioned, like the odor of marijuana, the testing, the discipline of officers, if you wanted to try to look at removing those or amending those. So that's what amending the ordinance would look like. I would need guidance from council to say what you want that amended ordinance to look like, and we could bring that back to you for you to consider. Repealing the ordinance would be direction from council that you wanted to repeal the ordinance. Staff would bring back an ordinance to repeal this ordinance. And then your third option of not amending or repealing, you would not need to take any action if you wanted to not repeal or amend the ordinance.
Thank you. Chief Campbell, could you please come up so they can get all the information, and I'm opening it up for discussion to the council. Yes. Chief, would you hold Mayor Pro Tem would like to speak?
Yeah, I think it's necessary to hear from the chief and the police department as far as the effects of this ordinance on our police department. However, I don't think that this is something that we're going to be able to determine tonight in any event. So I would be leery of repealing it right now, because if it's put up for repeal without the adequate information that we need to go forward with a decision, we can't bring it back up for, 6 months? 6 months. So I would like to.
It's not true.
I would like to. I'm sorry?
Go ahead, I'm gonna let you finish because he had a comment.
Okay. I would like to hear what our subject matter experts would have to say about this in the realm of how it affects our police department. Now, as it concerns with the Henry Garza and all the other opinions that we've had out there, because that's exactly what they are, opinions. They're not judges. The people who interpret the state law are judges. And any attorney or anybody else that has an opinion, including myself, is just an opinion. But I'm a representative first. I'm not a lawyer at any event. So as a representative, I represent our people, not our state. So if I have to go on one side, either the state or the people, my job is the people. So with that, I would like to take into consideration what the experts have to say in this and make an ordinance that makes sense for us. But I'm willing to listen to what you have to say, but if it's in that, I don't think we're gonna come to any agreement tonight,
Okay,
in my opinion. Thank you.
Any other council members like to speak before Mr. Cagle speak? Okay, Mr. Cagle.
Mayor and council, I just wanted to say, while there are lots of opinions, we ought to at least get out there what's not in dispute. You followed the charter. That's our constitution. And the state of Texas didn't write that constitution. It was approved by Killeen voters and amended over time, and it's our constitution. And you did exactly what you were supposed to do. And tonight, all you did was certify the results of the election. You did not adopt a law. The voters of Killeen adopted this law. And now, as one of the speakers said, we're in a mess because we have two laws you've been told to uphold. And so you've heard a lot of information on that, but I would hope that at least everybody in the crowd could understand you've done everything that you were supposed to do up to this point. You followed your constitution, and now you have to decide where we move on from here.
Thank you, Mr. Cagle. Chief Campbell. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council.
City Attorney Clemens was talking about the practical, how this will affect, I'm assuming, the police department, and you had a representative from the union to also speak on the concerns about officers leaving, and they want to enforce the law from a state perspective. Can you give us, elaborate some more on this, please?
Sure, some of this will be based on my opinion and on my experience. But I will say that there were points that were brought up that do raise concerns with me after talking with our legal advisor, particularly when it comes to search and seizure. The U.S. Constitution, under some bright line cases, have granted law enforcement officers the ability to search and seize illegal substances based on probable cause, and that probable cause being the odor of burnt marijuana, which many police officers here have the ability to detect that. And to take that away from us and try to comply with the ordinance will be very difficult at best, because we can't, based on our training and experience and the odor of marijuana, we don't know what the weight is. And this ordinance has a weight attached to it, I believe 4 ounces or less. So that will be problematic at best. I really have a problem with the point where you have to discipline an officer when that officer is trying to carry out the duties of the oath that he or she was sworn to uphold, the state law. But we do know that also, as Mr. Cagle just as talked about, we do have a responsibility to the voters of the city of Killeen also. Giving that direction for you from council, having everything that could be in contrast, could be problematic, and to hold an officer to potentially discipline an officer for he or she to lose their livelihood is not fair. So I think any provision where it comes to discipline an officer should be considered also. The fact that officers leave departments for many reasons. They have their personal reasons. I think as you look throughout the country, places like the state of Washington and Colorado, city of Chicago, city of Seattle, city of New York City, and even places here in Texas where the enforcement of marijuana is not a high priority, should be something that should be taken into consideration. We do that now. We use a great deal of discretion in enforcing marijuana laws. And taking away that discretion with you must do this and must do that, it would hamper police work. So now, will we adjust? Absolutely. We've adjusted since the election. There was a little bit of confusion, so we halted our operations when it comes to enforcement, and we look forward to the guidance that the council may give us along with our legal advisor.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Yes,
Any
ma'am.
questions from Chief Campbell? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chief. I just have a couple of quick questions. So as we heard today, there might be some, it sounds like, obviously some unintended consequences based on these conflicts that were brought to our attention today regarding this. So when it comes to the prohibition from making arrests on the local level, it was mentioned by someone in the audience that there could still be a challenge on the county side, or how would that work as far as the conflict that
Sure.
comes up in that respect?
Based on the ordinance as written and was canvassed and could be adopted as written today, that does not prohibit other law enforcement agencies from conducting operations in Killeen. There's multiple jurisdictions that have authority in the city of Killeen: constable's office, the sheriff's office, other county officials, even federal officers. So there's still a possibility, if you are a resident of Killeen, just because a city of Killeen office, the ordinance that stands now, if a city of Killeen officer confronts you, another law enforcement agency could confront you, and you can still be charged under Texas state law. There's a possibility that the county attorney's office, or maybe the district attorney's office, can review our reports, even though we didn't take a person into custody, but there's still a report that's generated. That person can still be subject to arrest if the county attorney feels that he wants to indict that person or charge that person based on their possession.
Okay. And so based on what we've heard from our attorney and some of the information that was also mentioned today, if we were to try to amend this so that we're maybe not in conflict with the state and the federal law, making those changes would gut the ordinance and then make it irrelevant virtually. My question is, though, I also heard you say that we're already doing this. We're already not enforcing at certain levels, or we're using officer discretion. So can you tell me what the difference would be between this ordinance versus a internal policy?
Sure. When we have an ordinance and you have words like shall and may, our officers are going to try their best we're going to abide by that. But, the law, under certain circumstances, under certain misdemeanors, Class C, gives us the officer to a bit of discretion in their work. And Killeen police officers do a very good job now of using their discretion when enforcing Class C violations. Speeding, for example. We don't say if you are going absolutely 52 miles an hour in the 50-mile-an-hour zone, we will write you a ticket. No, we use discretion. Now, will some people need to have a ticket? Yes. Can you give a warning? Is there other options? And taking away options from us, because we know that there's a scale of people that we deal with when we still deal with criminality. There's that first-time offender that may need some discretion used on them. And then there may be that person who was constantly in the drug trade. They traffic in drugs, and they traffic in weapons, and they're armed robbers. They break into people's property. They're the ones that's going around at nighttime breaking in cars. And you find them with some marijuana, well, then they may need to go to jail, because there's a scale of criminality that we deal with. And taking that discretion away will hamper police operations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, you made a statement that you halt on procedures. Is this, and what did you mean by that?
Sure.
Is that the memo that went out, or what?
Yes, ma'am. Just to clarify, on the date of the election, when the voters approved the ordinance as it was written at almost 70%, there was a little bit of confusion in the way we should do work. Our officers are like, "Hey, Chief, what are we doing now? Are we abiding by the ordinance that passed? Are we not abiding?" We heard other municipalities are doing some things. I said, well, listen, I'm gonna put out a memo as a stopgap measure. Let's halt the operation of low-level marijuana until there's some clarification on that. So the memo is out. It's a special order. Special orders come out because we use special orders to temporarily deal with an issue until they become a general order. So have a special order that and it looks just like the ordinance that's presented right now, where we're gonna halt the enforcement of low-level marijuana until there's some clarification, and then they will adjust accordingly.
Okay. Any more questions for Chief Kimball? Councilwoman Carr. You have questions, Chief? Mayor Pro Tem.
What would it look like? And this is not a question for you, but it deals with the police agency being the primary department that's impacted by this ordinance. Seeing as the ordinance has every 3 months or 3 months following and then a yearly afterwards, why don't we compile, because I wasn't prepared tonight to discuss with the police about coming up with a hard-driven ordinance or change to amendment or rescinding an ordinance tonight based off of anything that you say right now. This takes time, this takes evolution, because we're in the deep end. So now we have to work out what is best. I am not in favor of rescission of the will of the people, because as I stated before, as a representative of the people, that would be irresponsible on my part. However, to make it applicable and make it practical to our city, I think that's what we needed, the nuances of what needs to happen here. We're going to take more time than we probably have tonight to get to that. So with that, I would like to make a motion of direction.
You can't make a motion of direction until all council members have spoken and council member Cobbs have a comment.
That's not true, Mayor. I can make a motion of direction at any time. I can make it as soon as I start speaking.
Go ahead.
So I'd like to make a motion of direction that we set aside 3 months out from today to be able to take this information in and give some good, complete directions as far as an amendment, or if rescinding needs to happen at that time.
So, let me get some clarity. With this motion of direction, the ordinance will stay as is, and we will take 3 months to work with the city staff and the police and whomever if we want to modify it.
Yes, because we have to come back in 3 months anyway, unless it's rescinded tonight.
No. Ms. Clemens, before we move forward, can you clarify, do you understand what he's saying?
I believe he's referencing in the ordinance, section 2286, that says within 3 months of adoption of the ordinance, the city manager shall present to council a report concerning implementation of the ordinance. And so I believe that's what Mayor Pro Tem is referencing. And
yes, that's correct.
Right. So my question, can we get a second to this so we can go into discussion if someone's going to say? Okay, Councilwoman Gonzalez second the motion direction. So I just want to get clarity. So the police department, everyone in here understand that we're going to come back in 3 months, but the ordinance as is, and the citizens need to know this too, it is in effect as is. Is that correct?
that's my understanding of the motion.
It's been in effect since we canvassed it.
Well, no, it's
Mayor?
you gotta vote on it. You have to vote on it. The canvas to vote. Then it becomes in effect. Am I correct?
Well, that's what I said. I mean, you canvassed it earlier today, and so once the. Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? I'm just trying to get clarity first before we move on. So,
Mayor,
yes, sir.
can I talk?
Councilwoman Cobb is before you. Councilwoman Cobb,
Good
I'll
evening.
come back to you with the clarity.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and our guests tonight. I'm good with quotes, and there's one quote that stands out tonight. It says, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." The vote is the most powerful tool that a citizen or a constituent will ever have. It helps us when we're right, it helps us when we're wrong. As a public servant, I spoke to Mr. Bass before we had a little session together, and he was telling me all the reasons why we should vote for Proposition A. He had some excellent facts, but I still said no. Tonight, I have to still say no, but I want you to listen to what I have to tell you. You voted the desires and the wishes of how you see the city of Killeen with Proposition A. We're faced tonight with the law. I took an oath of office, and it said that I would be just, I would be fair, and I would be honest. And to do those things, that means that I could not break the law. But the day that we remain silent about what means so much to us, In order to change the law, we have heard what you have to do if you so strongly believe in this proposition. You've got to rally your representatives, your senators, your governor. You've got to start with changing a law. As a nurse, I know the side effects of marijuana and what happens. I want no child or an adult or any person to ever have to adhere because of a lack of information. It was nothing wrong with the vote. It was nothing wrong with you wanting that proposition because of the facts that you see. When I have to go into a prison or into a jail, as a mother, it breaks my heart. And then when I hear the story of how different that our laws have to match our crimes. It is nothing wrong with your voice on Proposition A about letting the law match the crime. However, the problem is that it's illegal. And you've got to take those desires, if you so desire those things, and you have to follow those steps and to change it. I get it. I get it as a mother. I get it as a public servant. I get it as a nurse. I get it.
Your time is up.
That quick?
Yes.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes. Thank you. Any other council member, Sagara?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. You have 3 minutes.
First, I just want to say thank you to the chief for explaining that. To say I was a little bit irked would probably be an understatement, because I understand that the voters voted, but I know that there was a special order issued a couple of days after, and I had listened to our police department and the chief prior to this, and I know that, just like you said earlier, it's something that the police do not support, and so I was out there telling everybody as to the reasons why I was not in favor of it, and I felt that having a special order right after the election, before the council even canvassed the votes, was a big concern to me. And so I think that we should have at least waited until after the votes were canvassed to decide on which way we want to go. And it's proven right here, as our Mayor Pro Tem has made a motion to just continue what's been happening for the last couple of weeks. It's hard to pull this back once it's out there. If we do table it, all that basically means is that we are approving it as is, because the ordinance does call for us to come back in 3 months. My big issue really hasn't even been the marijuana part. I understand that's the part that the voters feel that we need to change, but that's not the part that has really made me go against it. It's the section 22-83, which is what we've already talked about, the prohibition against city police using the odor of marijuana or hemp as probable cause. Out of the 1,800 from the list that I've gotten, you guys seen that I published it out in social media. Out of the 1,800 arrests that were made, a lot of them were more serious crimes. And I think that the number one concern for our voters, for our citizens, has always been crime. And we, even as a council, started a crime committee. And then we're just going against that and saying it, if you do commit a crime, we're taking this tool away from our police officers. So I'm more in favor, if we have to do this, as amending it and removing that one section. And that is my big concern, just amend it and take it. I know that our city attorney says if we amend it, it is like proving going against the state. But I just don't want to remove that tool from our police officers for them to be able to do the bigger job of crime reduction,
Sir,
which
your
is the
time
number.
is up.
Thank you, Mayor.
Madam City Attorney, back to my question. With the motion that's on the floor, motion of direction on the floor, that we would come back in 3 months and discuss this item. My question is the ordinance as is in place until 3 months?
Yes, unless you repeal or amend it, the ordinances will be in place as it's worded now.
Thank you. Going back to you, Chief Campbell, with the motion of direction that's on the floor, the memo that you sent out to your officers, will that go into place until the next 3 months? Will it still be in place until 3 months if we change it or not?
If the ordinance is still in effect, if the ordinance is still in effect, then to prevent confusion and to go against why I did it, one of the reasons is the will of the voters, and that order will stay in place.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion before we vote on
I have to
Councilman?
preface that I do have a boss, unless my boss says
Yes.
otherwise. I just,
it? Mr. Cagle?
No,
I'm not trying to put on the spot.
no,
but
that's no problem. We discussed this. Just to clarify one more time, the council did not pass an ordinance tonight. The voters passed it. All you
Right.
did was say the results of the election were true and correct.
Correct.
And so now this problem has been laid in your laps and my lap and the chief's lap and all the way down to officers on the street. We have 2 laws that have some conflicts in them. And so I guess the main thing I wanted to get across was you didn't pass any ordinance tonight. It was passed by the voters. And I understand the arguments on both sides. Voters spoke loud and clear, and we have some conflicts in state law.
Correct. But I want to make myself clear also. Tonight we do have 3 options. And if we choose whatever option we choose, I understand that the voters voted on it and we're listening to the people, but we still have 3 options. Councilwoman Gonzalez.
So I have a question, 2 parts with regards to Councilman Segarra's recommendation on amendment. We've received a lot of information this evening, and we're still receiving information as it relates to this. I do think that we need to do our due diligence to make sure that we understand the ramifications before those unintended consequences, as I mentioned, so that we're making a very informed decision for our constituents, but then also for our law enforcement officers. Mayor Pro Tem, you recommended 3 months, but the recommendation, we were asking if we felt that the 6th of December was proposed by Councilman Adams to bring it back, so that way we can take Councilman Segarra's information and the information we received and go from there and make a determination at that
Is
point.
that an amendment to the motion?
Yes, ma'am, I would like to make an amendment